But what makes these fish so unique is they come into the shore wash on their sides like a flounder, or a ray. They just come completely flat, and they'll grab a crab or a mouthful of hermit crabs or mollusks or snails, and then they'll just slide back.
That was Ray Montoya talking about the unique feeding habits of permit out of Oman. I've got another item to add to your bucket list today. This is the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today. We'll help you on your fly fishing journey with classic stories covering steelhead fishing, fly tying, and much more.
How's it going, everyone? Thanks for stopping by the Fly Fishing Show. In today's episode, I talk with Ray Montoya, a man on his own mission who has been fishing out of the Middle East for over 20 years now. Ray gets into a bunch of great DIY tips to remote areas and tells us why Oman, Yemen, and many parts of the Middle East are actually safer than some of the places we live in our own backyards. We talk about Adipose drift boats, how to catch fish out of a kayak, and how to stock fish that are hanging close to the shore. I wanted to quickly let you know of a new hosted fly fishing trip I have coming next year. This is your typical hosted trip, but on steroids. Go to wetflyswing.com/destination to get on the waiting list for the next big trip. We'll be heading to a lodge, to one of the great destinations, and accompanied by a few of the big guests from this podcast. We are planning trips eventually for Alaska, BC, Mexico, Belize, New Zealand, and more. But right now I only have 10 slots available for this first trip. So go to wetflyswing.com/DESTI Nation to get more information on the first trip and to sign up for the waiting list for any of the upcoming trips. So, without further ado, here's Ray Montoya. How's it going, Ray?
It's going well. Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, good. Good. What time is it? Well, let's see. Now, are you in the Middle East, or did you come over?
We flew into the U.S. Last Thursday. I'm in my home state today, New Mexico, and I'll be here for the next few months.
Oh, cool. Great. Well, we'll get into a little bit on the traveling thing. Obviously right there is, I have some questions there about that whole traveling process, but we're going to get into a lot of the, some of your fishing over in the Middle East and some stories. And, I originally, I think, heard about you from Oliver White, who I had on the show a while back. And so we're going to dig into all that and some cool species. But before we do, maybe we can just talk about how you first got into fly fishing and then how you brought it up found your way over to Yemen and Oman in that area.
Okay, great. Yeah. I kind of started the way a lot of people my age started, and as a child, a young man, and I started fly fishing with a glass rod in Texas. In '72, we were just running around like all boys. That I was in high school and doing a lot of fishing and exploring, and I came upon a glass fly rod with I think it had a Fluger reel on it and an old cracked fly line, and we started making our own cork poppers and fishing for cichlids in the rivers around San Antonio, Texas. And from there, it just took off. And I focused a lot on trout when I moved to New Mexico, and in the early '90s, started fishing bonefish down in Punta Allen in the Shankan Reserve. I got interested in the saltwater primarily from watching Spanish Fly, Jose Wajeba shows, and Flip Pallot, and all of that. So, yep. So that's how I got into the saltwater aspect of it. And once I discovered saltwater fishing, and specifically sight fishing, there was no going back. That's all I wanted to do.
How did you find yourself over in? Most people don't think of Yemen and Oman and the Middle East as fly fishing destinations. How did you find yourself out there? Because you lived out there for about 17 years, right? Or you still do?
Yeah. I still live there, and we moved to Oman in 2002. My wife and I are teachers, and we've been working in the international school system. So we moved from Oman. Previously, we were in Southeast Asia. We did 4 years in the Philippines and 4 years in Indonesia, West Papua to be exact. And so the way that works is as a teacher, you go to these job fairs and you travel around and you look at different schools. We kind of fell in love with the American International School in Muscat, Oman, and decided that's where we wanted to raise our family. And so we moved there. And once we got there, and I realized, the potential for fly fishing, not only was it untapped, it was immense. Oman has about 1,600 kilometers of coastline. Back then in 2002, I would say about 95% of that was pretty much untouched, unexplored. And so I just started exploring. We did a lot of family camping trips, mostly beach campers. We're real water people. And it just took off from there, and the species and the fish just started coming.
Yeah. I saw a video. I was watching a video of you. You've got I think a Vimeo channel out there, and you got your truck with your racks on top. You're pulling off a kayak and a sea kayak, and then you got your cots are laid out on the beach with you just had this amazing spot there. I don't know if that was Oman or Yemen or whatever, but is that pretty typical, that just camping typical on the beach? That's
very typical. We have beaches that are unbroken for one particular beach on the Al Wusta coast. You can drive that beach for 200 kilometers, and the camping is extremely. It's safe. It's easy. All you really need is a shade. We never use tents. There's no insects or bugs to bother you.
Wow.
And so you just find a piece of water, you find a piece of beach or an estuary, and you set up and along that southern coast, especially, you probably will end up somewhere no closer than 40 or 50 miles or 100 kilometers from the nearest village.
Huh. Wow, that's really cool. So, it sounds like this oasis, this perfect place. When most people, or at least a lot of people, think about the Middle East and all that area in Africa, and you just think of all the crazy stuff that happens, the wars, the pirates, all that stuff. Can you talk about how, that whole
Sure.
thing where people worry about safety, but it sounds like to you got this amazing place. What's, maybe you can go into a little bit on all that.
Absolutely. We're all guilty of basing our perceptions of places on what we see in cable news or the media or social media or whatever, and we have to, we forget that those are just little snippets of places, and sometimes very small places in very large countries. And I've experienced this all over the world. I've fished in Venezuela quite often, Cuba. We used to sneak into Cuba during the Bush years, and through Mexico, just fly in and parts of Africa, Sudan, places like that. Generally, when you hit the ground, you're just going to find warm and welcoming people. There are conflicts and there are issues all over the world, but a lot of these conflicts and issues are isolated incidences or isolated geographically. There are a lot of people who I run into overseas who question me about the safety of the United States.
Oh, right.
I'm going to go to Chicago. I'm going to go to Los Angeles. Is it safe?
That's right.
What should I watch out for?
Yep.
So
that's true.
Yeah.
That's
the interesting thing too is that as far as destination travel or adventure travel or exploration travel, as for people who want to fish, I've come to the realization that some of these countries that have been in war-torn regions or civil conflicts or just suffering from abject poverty have incredible natural resources because, ironically, they haven't had because of war or conflict, they haven't had the time to exploit them.
Right.
Or they don't have the resources because they're so poor to exploit them. And that was the case when we went to Yemen, and we visited the island of Socotra. The fishermen there, majority of them don't have boats. They don't even, most of them were fishing with cast nets from the shore. They don't even have like line nets or set nets. So or hooks or lines for that matter.
Right.
So because of the lack of resources to actually exploit the resource, the fishing and the ecosystem, the environment there was totally pristine and untapped.
Yeah, that's cool. I would like to get into, I mean, I think we're going to dig into some of the species that you've caught over there. But I think, hitting on that DIY exploration is a big part of what I want to hit on today, because, I'm in kind of a DIY destination season, we're calling it, where we're kind of focusing. We've had, like I said, Oliver White and Jako Lucas and a lot of other people, just talked to Jim Klug, so we had all these people talking, but, really just getting down to that DIY, I haven't had a real good episode where I talked about, if you wanted to go do it, yourself, kind of the, why do it, what are the advantages, and maybe can you talk a little about what DIY exploration in unique areas, and maybe talk about some tips if people want to go do it. I mean, I guess we could focus on the Middle East, right?
Exactly. Yeah. First of all, I mean, it's not something that you do. It's not something you do to save money. And it also requires a lot more time than perhaps going to a lodge or a set organized fishing program. And it's not something you do if your first priority is to catch fish. You've got to have a whole different mindset. You've got to have a very open, flexible, realistic idea of what you're getting into, and that's the base. At least that's where you're going to start from. After that, it's just a lot of research, and fortunately, when I first started doing this, we didn't have the advantage of Google Maps and the internet to do that research. It was all based on just talking to people, calling people, looking for maps, looking for books, whatever hard resource material we could get a hold of. But mostly it was just, you get on the ground and you just start, talking to people and especially, forming some connection with the locals. And that's very, very important.
Mm-hmm. How have you done it with the language barrier? Has that been an issue?
It has been an issue. I mean, I speak a little bit of Arabic and other languages, but not enough that I can communicate exactly what I'm looking for. What I do is I travel with an iPad or a device, and I have photographs of species that I'm looking for that I can show locals, and we do a lot of drawing in the sand and a lot of broken Arabic and. Mm-hmm. In recent years, in the past 10 years, I've done a lot of fishing with a friend, Kamal Abu Saidi, who is an Omani, and probably one of the first and only Omanis who fly fishes. And when I met him, he was spin fishing, and I sort of brought him along, and we got him a fly rod, and we got him going, and now he's totally addicted to fly fishing. He's typically by my side on these trips. He accompanied me to Yemen on our exploration trip for bonefish, and having Kamal along made a huge difference. So yeah, having somebody who speaks a little bit of the language, and of course the dialects in that part of the region are all different, just like as they are everywhere in the world.
Right.
And the Arabic they speak in Yemen is different than the Arabic they speak in Oman and Egypt and etc. But that made a huge difference. Going back to what I said earlier about time, you've got to have a lot of time. You've got to have, if you hope to get in a week of fishing, plan for 3 weeks.
Yep.
Of travel. That's my suggestion. Because especially in that region, especially when you're fishing oceanside habitats, you're not always going to have the conditions to fish. You're not always going to have the tides and So there's going to be downtime. But fortunately, I mean, that's why you're out there DIYing it, is that downtime. That's, to me, that downtime when we're not fishing is just as valuable and as exciting and as interesting and the reason we're out there in the first place. Yeah. We had years ago, I had a couple of guys show up. Mike Ward, I think Mike Ward, he's in Montana and Washington. He owns Adipose drift boats.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And a Canadian guy, God, I don't remember his name. Anyways, they showed up and they had the perfect attitude. They were after a permit. That's what everybody wants, is an Arabian permit.
Oh, okay.
The blotchi, Trichinotis blotchi species. And, they had such an amazing time, and they visited all these small villages. They interacted with the locals. They got haircuts and shaves. They they played games with the locals. They fed camels. It was just a whole
just traveling
experience. Exactly.
What is your so that is a good tip that you mentioned there about having some time, 3 weeks, and you mentioned savings is not the thing. It seems like but there might be something if you're there for 3 weeks, for example, just touching on the money piece for a little bit. If you spent $5,000 for a lodge or $10,000 or whatever it is. But if you were to do a trip down to the Middle East, obviously there's expenses there. But it seems like you spread out over 3 weeks, 4 weeks, that it would be a little bit cheaper, just your cost per day. Is that true, or are there other things we're missing here?
Absolutely, it's going to be cheaper than a lodge, especially in that region, in that part of the world. I mean, what lodges are in the Indian Ocean.
Right. The Seychelles, right, is probably
Seychelles, Fishes, Brandon's Atoll, places like that. Yep. And a lot of liverboard operations, and they're very expensive, and they're costly to the operators, which is why those prices are there. But your biggest expense, aside from the airfare, is going to be your car rental.
Oh, the car rental, right? And then what car? What did you have in one of that video? You had a car that looked like it was like a.
I drive a Nissan Patrol.
Oh yeah, we don't even have those here. That's right.
No, you. Yeah, I've not seen them in the U.S. Not the model
It's a SUV. It kind of looks like a one of those Land Rovers. I'll put a link in the show notes to a photo of it. But it's kind of like a Land Rover looking thing, right?
Yeah. And it's a beast of a car. I've had some incredible adventures in that, and it's never let me down.
What's your if you had to think, your most memorable adventure in that truck? Does one come to mind?
Oh yeah. I'll tell you one. We were driving back from a trip, my wife and I, and I just had new alloy rims put on. I took off the steel rims and I put alloy rims on, and they put the old lug nuts from the steel rims on the alloy rims, and the nuts didn't fit. And everything was fine for the entire trip, but on the drive home, my left front wheel came off.
Oh, jeez.
And just took off. It was right at dusk, and all of a sudden the left wheel came off. The car sort of tilted left. Sparks just started flying across the driver's window.
Jeez.
And look, and I see the tire just disappear into the desert, into the night.
Oh.
We were going quite fast. We drive these desert roads at anywhere from 120 to 140, which is like 85, 90 miles an hour.
Oh, yeah.
And, but managed, I mean, this thing is so heavy. It's such a tank that we just kind of just rode it out until we came to a stop, and looked, and I had about 3/4 left of my drum. The rest had been more ground flat. But I had enough screws sticking out of the drum that I could lift it up and attach the spare, and managed to get home with the spare.
Way.
And yeah, with 3/4 of a drum and the spare. And
wow.
But I have to say that the reason I was able to do that is an Omani, a Bedouin, stopped and looked at it and said, "No, you can put a tire on that, no problem."
No kidding.
Because I was ready to hitch a ride nearest town and get a truck to tow us.
That's right, because you're not calling a tow truck out there. It's funny. I've got actually next week. I have I believe it's next week on the show. I have Seth Kugel, who was the frugal traveler of the New York Times. He was a columnist for a number of years, and and he talked about some DIY tips and things like that, and but that was one of them. Well, one of them was when you're out in these remote places, how he talked about the insurance. One of them, his notes was that I can't remember what he called it. I think he called it evacuation insurance. So if you actually get injured,
travel companies sell you that.
Is that something you? I mean, what do you use in case I guess you're working with the schools, so do you have coverage there, or how does that work?
We have good coverage. We have evac insurance, and And when you go to it, like if you were to go to the Sudan, if you were to sign up for the Sudan trip, or even though in any of those Indian Ocean trips, the provider is going to ask you, not going to ask, it's going to require you to have evac insurance.
Oh, I gotcha.
That's an additional cost to you, and
so that's part of it.
And, that is part of it. We carry, when we travel, we carry, compressors and all the emergency equipment you can think of.
Sure. So you don't have to worry about, so you're self-contained.
We're very self-contained, because often, once you get off the paved roads, you could be 40, 50 kilometers from a sealed road, down a beach somewhere, and there's no way, even if you did get stuck or something broke, you're going to get out.
So do you guys have everything, food, water for a couple weeks sort of thing, or what do you guys?
Yeah, and if you're going to show up, that's what you're going to need. You're going to hit the ground. You're going to rent a 4-wheel drive. Most people go with the Mitsubishi Prados or the Toyota. Not Mitsubishi. It's the Toyota Prados or the Mitsubishi. There's a 4-wheel drive.
Yeah. What does it cost for per day for a vehicle?
It's quite pricey. Yeah, that like I said, that's going to be your biggest expense. It's probably going to be close to $100 US a day
per day, right? Yep.
And and then what most people do, they pick up their car and then they head to the local shopping centers and souks, and they start getting their materials. Camping is quite popular in Oman, even with the Omanis. So all of the shops sell camping equipment, and it's kind of cool because you'll find camping equipment in these souks and shops that you won't find anywhere in the world. Custom made stoves and windscreens and coolers and things like that. And so you just make sure you have a good supply of water, and you pick up a phone chip for nothing in Oman.
Right.
Yeah. Unlike, I think most of the world, in my experience, getting phone service and a chip is so easy compared to here in the U.S. where all the phones are locked.
Right. Oh yeah. Well, and the other option too, I guess, is it's fairly reasonable, going with the satellite phones now, right? Or is that
that's not necessary in Oman.
Yeah.
I mean, Oman is, the one thing you're going to find in that part of the world is, especially Oman, UAE, is that the infrastructure is high. It's
not
first class.
World. Okay.
It's first class. No, it is there. Yeah. And the reason is, and it's all new. I mean, most infrastructure in that region has been built since the 70s. So you're driving on brand new roads, and there's cell phone everywhere, and hospitals and clinics. And
what is it like as far as the, what's the nearest? Do you live in the cities, or is it, if you had to say, the difference, somebody who hasn't been there, how is it different from your typical, say you're in New Mexico? What's the town, your near city in New Mexico?
Well, right now we're in Albuquerque, but we actually live up in northern New Mexico on the Los Brazos, which is extremely rural.
Okay. But it's actually, you're in New Mexico, so it's actually probably, the environment isn't all that different, or are there a lot of similarities? There are a lot of similarities
in southern New Mexico. Northern New Mexico is all high elevation, 5 to 10,000 feet. I mean, we had 200 inches of snow at our house this winter. Oh, wow. I fished Baja a lot, and I would say Baja and Oman are identical. If you were to drive, if you're blindfolded, drop me in either one, I wouldn't be able to tell you which was which.
No kidding.
No kidding. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, that's a good picture because I'm sure a lot of people have.
And
been
and if
there.
you love open space, you love horizon, and you love desert meets sea, that sort of environment, then
Yeah.
Oman that's the place. It's just the backdrops we fish against are just incredible sometimes, and 300-foot cliffs and sculpted badland hills, and it's just amazing.
That's cool. Well, let's jump into the some on the species stuff. And I had one note here before we get there, just on the fly shops. This is just kind of I actually had today. I have Mike Mercer on from the Reading Fly Shop, and but it's interesting because you're out there. I mean, I imagine there isn't a fly shop nearby. How do you, is there that? How do you get all your gear that you need and all that stuff?
Well, we bring it all in, and I mean, you can get fluorocarbon. Yeah, they have tackle shops, but it's all conventional tackle.
Okay.
And so you can get fluorocarbon spools. You're not going to find anything like fly lines or reels or rods or flies or fly tying material. Nothing like that.
Gotcha.
Unless you pull something off a goat or a camel, you can tie with that, I guess.
That's right. That's right.
You got to bring everything in that regard.
Gotcha. And you come in during the what's the year there? You come in there in the fall?
Yeah, Oman, the area that we fish, the southern Oman, which is Dhofar and the Al Wusta coast, that area right now, as probably starting in this week, going through end of August, middle of September, is going through a monsoon season they call the Harif, and so. And it's serious. I mean, it's rains, lashing rain, probably 40, 50, 60 knot winds, and 6 to 10 meter seas.
Jeez.
So you can't even get near the coast. And it's like right now, I think they're actually experiencing a cyclone or a tropical depression on the coast. But for big fish and for, if you can get in on the shoulder season right after that, so September, October can be incredible for a variety of species. You get the big breams and the trevallies. The permit and the sight fishing species are a little more difficult because of the conditions are still rough.
Oh, right.
If you're going strictly for sight fishing, and then you probably want to start November, December, January, February, good months.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. So that's good to know. What as far as species now, I mean, we've talked a little bit on this on GTs and permit and bonefish. I've had some guests talk about that. What other than those species? What would you say is your top species that you fish for down there?
Shore-based. Shore-based.
Yeah, let's say. Yeah, I guess shore-based.
Because we sometimes use paddle boards and kayaks and small pangas as well.
Yep.
Shore-based, you can target. We get little striped bonitos and long-tailed tuna from shore. Sometimes you can get even mahi from shore. There's a variety of species of smaller species trevallies like big eye and orange spot, and black tip trevally, which are a lot of fun. And all the trevallies pull hard, like jacks do. They all pull really hard. And
gotcha.
There are a variety of species of bream, and we get wrasse and tuskfish, which are quite beautiful. There's several species of triggerfish, bluefish, a whole variety of mackerels and scads and
gotcha.
Groupers. If you're fishing a clouser down deep, you can pick up anything. You can pick a big grouper or a spangled emperor. That I think the one fish that I love to target the most is the spangled emperor, the blue spangled emperor.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, good. And that's one that we definitely haven't talked about on here. So maybe if we'll dig into that a little bit just as we go, thinking about that if somebody was to head out in that area down the line, or just to share another species, we can talk a little bit about that. But as far as the I just want to make sure I hit on that the DIY travel tip stuff. Are there any other, you mentioned a couple tips, any other tips that you would recommend if somebody was going to, either head out to that area or anywhere where it's kind of remote? Anything else to be thinking about?
Well, a GPS, just common sense things. Make sure you have a GPS. Make sure you're in good physical health. And is a mapping software on a phone GPS good enough, or do you need an actual full on? No. You can even actually use a smartphone.
Yeah. Okay.
And like I said, most of Oman now has cell phone coverage. There are a few places that we like to fish where there's no cell phone coverage, but not many. I mean, most of the places you're going to have a signal. And you can use your GPS device and mapping device quite easily. Okay. I would recommend making sure that you have backup fly lines, because remember, you're not going to be able to replace anything once you're there.
All right. How like just a one backup line? And is there a specific line you like to use over there?
I would bring a variety of lines. I bring floating lines because there's this fishing on the surface with surface poppers and surface flies can work quite well. I primarily use a clear sinking tip line, floating intermediate line. I like that line.
And would this be if you're talking about the Spangled Emperor, would that be you use multiple lines?
Yeah, multiple. Well, the Spangled Emperor, you're primarily going to get them down deep, so you want an intermediate or a sinking tip line for the Spangled Emperors. For the breams and permits, a floating line works fine. You're going to spot them quite easily, and they're going to be high up in the water column. If you're just prospecting, bring a full intermediate line. You don't need a full sinking line, just a full intermediate line and a box of heavy clousers. That's all you're going to need. And
what's heavy clousers mean?
I like to fish like a 1 out or a 2. I like a big fly. I mean, because these fish are big. Some of them are quite large.
Yeah.
And, if you're sight casting, then you can fish a smaller pattern. But if you're just prospecting, you want a big, heavy fly to get down there. Maybe 30 grams, 20, 30 grams, something like that. Big dumbbells, big dumbbell eyes. But a variety of weights. We primarily fish. We use a lot of crab patterns.
Okay.
And crab patterns, clousers, gurglers, foam poppers, crease flies. And of course, the South Africans. We get a lot of South Africans who come in DIY, and they have their own patterns as well.
Yeah. Okay. If you had to pick your, just for Spangled Emperor, what if you had to pick one pattern, one or two fly patterns?
I'd fish a clouser.
Just a clouser. Yeah.
Just a clouser, and just I tie my clousers with yak hair. I like the profile it gives. And I don't use a lot of color. Typically it's just black on white or dark gray on white or olive over white.
Okay.
If you're partial to chartreuse, like a lot of people are, if you really, my whole philosophy about flies is you fish what you believe in. Fish what gives you confidence.
Yeah. How big are these? How long are these flies?
Oh, probably about 4 inches.
Oh yeah,
5 inches.
4 to 5. Okay. And when you're fishing down deep, so what sort of line are you gonna if you're getting down to these the emperor fish? How deep are you getting, and what line are you using to get down?
We're fishing them with. I primarily use 8 weights, but for emperor, I would definitely suggest a 10 weight. And full intermediate line, it would get down enough. You don't have to get down to the bottom with emperor. Okay. You just have to get down, maybe 3 or 4 meters, and you're just fishing above the reef. Primarily, we target them from rocks, and they love structure. So you're going to lose a lot. We probably lose about half the ones we hook, the big ones. It's probably about a 50%.
How big are we talking here?
Oh, we're talking in pounds, maybe 10, 15 pounds.
Oh, nice.
A big.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to take. I'm not even sure. Can you describe? I guess, do these things look more like a bonefish or more like a permit?
They, it's the emperors. They kind of look like they've got they kind of look like a bream, and they've got an elongated nose. They got a huge flat paddle-like tail, very powerful tail, and the coloring in them is just spectacular. They're bronze colored with neon blue streaks coming off their eyes and patches of neon blue along their fins and touches of pink. They're just a beautiful fish.
Nice. It's funny. I just Googled up the emperor fish, and I think it's Jeff. Yeah. Oh no, the global fly fisher. But a picture of Jeff Currier comes up on which I noticed. I think he has some of you're on his site. You've fished with Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff and his wife Granny came out to Oman a few years back and visited, and we met up with. I hosted them at my house for dinner, and then. They took off down south. They had a rental, and then we met up with them about a week later. And Jeff had some huge adventures there. He had some mishaps too. So,
oh, did he?
But yeah, well, I'll let him tell you those stories.
Yeah. Well, I heard a couple of them. He told one on his episode about getting. Well, I think it was quite a long time ago, but getting attacked in a bus on an African trip. But But yeah, we'll have to. Yeah, maybe next time I get him on, I'll hear some more of his stories.
Ask him about the fish he lost in Oman.
Okay,
it's a great story.
All right, cool.
Fish too.
So yeah, okay. So I'm getting. Look, I'll have a link in the show notes to the emperor fish, and yeah, it's beautiful. It's got some blue in it, and
it's one of the strongest pulling fish I've ever caught. It's a bulldog of a fish, and if you can just keep them off the bottom, you got a chance. But they just go right into the reef.
Oh, right. Gotcha. So just to finish up on that line, so are you using like a scientific angler tropical?
I'm using, I like the Rio lines.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm using, like for the permit and the bream, I like the Rio intermediate with the clear tip. And then just the basic saltwater Rio lines.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good. So that covers that. And then flies, we talked a little bit about that. Pretty straightforward. Are there any other, as far as just, when you're out there fishing for those, again, if we stick on the emperor fish, any tips, just general fishing tips on getting those?
Yeah. The biggest mistake people make when they come down is they get in the water, especially because you have to remember that all of our flats are beach flats. They're beachside flats. So we're fishing gutters and so you're primarily fishing when the tide. You're not fishing at the top of the tide. You're fishing when the tide is the best is probably the last 3 hours going out and the first 3 hours coming in. Okay. You'll have a break there in between when it ebbs, where you won't be doing much. But when you're walking those beaches, stay far away from the edge of the water. In fact, I once got a comment on one of my permit videos because I was casting to the fish far from the edge of the water, and then someone commented that not knowing who I was, I think they thought I was Arab. That someone said that Arabs can't swim, and that's why he's not fishing in the water. But the real reason is that the permit and the bream, they are fishing. They themselves are hunting in the shore wash and right on the edge. What makes these Omani permits so unique and different, and they're the same species that they get in Australia and throughout the Indian Ocean. But what makes these fish so unique is they come into the shore wash on their sides like a flounder, or a ray. They just come completely flat. And they'll grab a crab or a mouthful of hermit crabs or mollusks or snails, and then they'll just slide back with the swell as the swell comes in and out. So often, if you're walking close to the water, you're going to spook them, you don't have a chance. So stay well away from the edge of the beach when you're hunting permits, they're tough. It's a tough fishery. It's not like the Bahamas or Mexico or Belize, where you get these beautiful knee-deep flats, and you see the fish tailing and swimming in clear water. These fish are in shore wash and sand and silts being churned, and sometimes all you'll get is a glimpse of a tip of a tail or a fin. And even when you make the perfect presentation, keep the swell will pull the fly or bury the fly so the fish can't see it.
Oh yeah.
And so there's just so many other variables that have to lock into place for success to happen.
How do you make that perfect? So you're talking, so these fish are coming in, turning on their side because it's so shallow, and then feeding on mollusks and stuff. How do you, so are you waiting till they get within, 20 or 30 feet of the shore,
sometimes you're casting them at them from your knees just to keep your profile down.
Yeah. So they're coming right in. Like, are they?
They're coming right in, and it's rare that you'll get one. I've caught quite a few actually when they've taken the fly on its side. But usually, what I do is once I see the fish, I'll keep track of it, and as it slides back out, it'll swim down the beach a little bit, and I'll move down, and then as it starts to come back in, that's when I present my fly. So it's still, it'll be you'll have enough water, it'll be upright, and you'll have enough water to present. But when you find a fish, these fish actively, when they're actively feeding, when you find a fish, just be patient, wait, you've got to wait for your opportunity to present the fly, because they're going to stick around as long as they haven't seen you.
Oh,
and you've got a shot.
So when they come in, they're on their side. Do they just stick around and just hang on their side, or do they go out and come back and go? They
go back out, and they go in and out with the, and obviously, your best opportunity is your first cast.
Yep.
So if you're patient and just make sure you get a good presentation on your first cast, and that's after your first cast, I would say your odds go down 50%. Yeah. But that said, I've chased a permit up and down a beach for an hour and cast at it. Put 100 crab casts in front of it and changed out crabs 3 or 4 times, and actually in the end ended up catching that fish. But that's rare. Most often, once they see you, they're gone.
Yeah. Okay. And are you once you're camping out there, are you able to just grab a couple of these and throw them on the barbecue? Or it sounds like I was just reading here a little bit on the this was from Jeff Currier's blog post. He had a link to a site, which I'll put a link in, but it says Catch Care says Spangled Emperor are targeted for their eating qualities. Have you ever tasted one?
Yeah, I eat a lot of Spangled Emperor. They're delicious.
There you go.
Incredible fish. We don't eat the permit. Occasionally, I have eaten them. Occasionally, a fisherman will give us one. The bream the bream, the Spangled Emperor. They're all delicious, and that's what we're eating on the beach. And so really, all you need to bring is oil and rice, potatoes, some sort of starch supplement, and you're good to go for as long as you want.
No kidding. So you don't have to, just a little bit. You don't have any special recipes; just throw them on the barbecue and go with it.
Oh yeah, we have lots of recipes, but primarily, we just like to rub them down with olive oil.
Yep.
Salt and pepper, and put them on a grill.
Gotcha. What type of when you cast out there? So, and now we're not talking deep. So, I mean, if they're coming in, they're feeding in shallow. So you're still using that intermediate line when they come in. Are you?
I'll tell you why I use the intermediate line. Because you're fishing in swell, beach swell. The floating line. If you use a floating line, it's on the surface.
Yeah.
The swell will pull your crab pattern or a fly around. It also will tend to, if you're not using a casting basket or something to manage your line, a floating line will definitely move around and tangle around your feet. And it just I just find the intermediate line easier to manage in beach swell than a floating line.
Are you using a casting basket most of the time? Sometimes
we use a casting basket, but most often, if we're just targeting, if we're sight fishing on beaches, I wouldn't recommend this but it's not. I just drag a line.
Yeah, you're not casting a huge amount of line.
You're not casting a huge. You're making typically you're making a 20 to 35 foot cast.
Gotcha. Okay. And what? I think you mentioned you're using a 8 to 10 weights, or do you have one rod that
primarily 8 weights? Yeah, we're using 8 weights, and if it's, I will move up to a 10 weight if the wind kicks up, because it's just easier to punch a fly into the wind with a 10 weight than an 8 weight.
Oh, okay. And I think I noticed in one of your videos you had a Reddington rod, or maybe do you have a specific rod company or reel that you like to use?
I use Reddington rods. I have some old Sage RPLX rods.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of use them sparingly because they can't be replaced any longer.
All right.
I love the old RPL Sage rods and the X RPLX rods. But honestly, I'll tell you, I use the Reddingtons. I use the Vapin and the Predator rods. I like them. I like their return policy.
Uh-huh.
I break a lot of rods. I break about a couple rods a year.
Why? Just from catching big fish, or
some about 50-50. Sometimes catching big fish. Sometimes I fall on them, or just mishaps. I've fallen on a few rods chasing fish. But as far as reels, I've been using the same reel since 1995. I bought a Tibor Everglades, and that was, I believe, the year they came out. So it's one of the very first Tibor Everglades, and I've had it rebuilt maybe 3 or 4 times, and that's my go-to reel.
Okay, cool. So yeah, as we, kind of work along here, I mean, any other things we're missing? I guess, we're kind of talking, I mean, this is really interesting talking about you talked about a little bit about getting to the deep water, but it sounds like maybe you're fishing more in the shallows for these emperors. And is that the case, or is that
yeah, for the emperors, we're targeting fish off of rocks. Mm-hmm. And, there's primarily we're fishing off beaches, for the permit and the bream. The bream like to cruise the beaches, and they hunt the crabs and the small fish that inhabit those habitats. For other species like trevallies and the shari, that I call it a shari. I can give you Arabic names for these fish too. The emperor is a shari.
Uh-huh.
The bream is a kofer. But for the other species, you're looking for structure. You're walking out of rocky points. And as we say, we're fishing off the bricks, and you're casting. Sometimes you're sight fishing; you'll see them cruising by, but often you're just you're blind casting out and fishing structure.
Okay, cool.
We'll do a lot of fishing from kayaks and paddle boards as well.
Oh yeah, that's right. What is your go-to? You use a few different boats. If you had to pick one, what's the boat you go with most often?
I'm kind of partial to my kayak, my Hobie kayak, and I keep it pretty sparse. I don't have any attachments or rod holders or anything. It's fun. And we're primarily sight fishing with these. You come across fish on the surface, schools of fish on the surface, and so you approach them with the kayak. And when you think you're within range, you've got your rod ready with all your lines stripped out, ready to go. And you just gently put down your paddle and pick up your rod and make your presentation. It's kind of harrowing though. It's sometimes in heavy weather we've had some instances where big fish will actually try to pull you towards the rocks or into surf. And I've had many times where you've got the rod handle in your mouth and you're back paddling as hard as you can to avoid crashing into rocks. And,
right. Huh. And this is just, you have a paddle. You don't have any sort of a foot.
No. I know that system, and those are actually quite popular. There's a lot of people who use those for conventional fishing. Yeah, the Mirage system, I believe it's called. Yeah,
gotcha. And obviously the paddle boards, if you're traveling, work well because you can fold them up in a bag and take them on the plane.
Yeah. We've got inflatables, but we've also got fixed paddle boards. The paddle boards we can only use in optimal conditions, but the paddle boards give you a huge advantage over the kayak in that you can sight fish because you're standing. Whereas from a kayak, it's very difficult to sight fish because you're almost at water level.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, anything else you want to cover here? Anything else? Any tips or anything we should be covering? I mean, I guess we talked. I mentioned we talked about the emperor fish, but I mean, I guess going back to those, so we're talking more of the deeper, kind of rocky. And are you still using an intermediate line on those?
Yes,
Okay.
It's an intermediate line. My advice is to concentrate on the southern region of Oman.
Okay.
If you come to Oman, and try to get obviously just try to get as far away from civilization as you can. Recently, the situation has improved. We had a really bad situation the past 15 years in Oman with illegal fishing, illegal netting, and illegal workers. And it was it's an old story. It's just all based on greed. It's just a few people trying to get make a profit and exploit a resource to its full extent. But in the past year, the Omani government has cracked down on that big time. We noticed, typically, when I first got to Oman, you'd see a couple of boats go out with local Omanis in them, and then that all changed about in 2005, 2006, and people started coming in with indentured workers and sending out hundreds of boats at a time, and now just this past year, I noticed we had opportunities we fished some places where it was normal to see 100 boats launch every morning, and because of the crackdown, now we maybe see 1 or 2 boats going out. So we're hoping the situation is going to improve now that they've stopped all of the illegal fishing.
Oh, right, okay. And just one more note on the fishing. So as far as the the strips, or what type of stripping, or do you do mix it up a little bit, or what's that look like?
I mix it up. It's different for different species. The permit and the bream species. Our permit, if they see the fly and they'll actually and they're happy, you haven't made you out, they will actually and they're feeding equifeed, you'll see them turn on the fly and eat it, and then it's just a permit set, a traditional permit set, which is just a long slow pull until you feel the line come tight. Main thing is just the bream sometimes like to be teased. They can be finicky. Sometimes you have to switch out a fly or fish a smaller fly if you're sight fishing them. You'll get refusals from them. Permit, like all permit, sometimes you can do everything right, and they just, for some reason, they don't want to eat. And that's just the way. That's permit fishing. Everybody know. If you fish permit, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's nothing special, nothing different than I would Mexico or the Bahamas.
Gotcha. So if for those spangled emperors, so you're just casting out and pretty much just
casting it out, you're letting it sink. Do a little countdown, let the fly get down, and then it's just
like a 10 count strips. Sort of thing.
Yeah. Pardon?
Oh, like a 10-second count or something like that. Let it depending on where
absolutely.
You're at.
Yeah, and fish heavy tippets. I like to keep my terminal system really simple. I just have a long piece of a butt section that's usually 40 pound, 50 pound. Into that, I'll put put a piece of 20.
Okay.
I'll Albright a piece, and Albright. I like the Albright knot for that kind of connection.
Okay, perfect. So let's see here now. As far as again, back to the traveling, do you have any gear, non-fishing gear that you kind of don't leave home without when you're out there traveling? Whether that's I guess hidden for the beach trip, anything special you always have out there?
In travel in general, I always travel with a bug net.
Okay.
You never know. Even when I go, I go to Christmas every year, and I usually do 2 or 3 weeks of DIY out there. And I stay at the lodges, but it's still primitive, and it's still you're still gonna need that extra protection.
So the bug net is just the thing that goes over your head, sort of.
Oh no! I'm talking about something you put over your bed.
Oh, over your bed. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I always travel with a bug net in where, if you're traveling in Africa or in the South Pacific, you got to have that in your suitcase because you don't know what your sleeping situation is going to be.
And this is just is this just a thing that just goes inside, just wraps around your whatever you're sleeping in?
Well, it just packs in a bag, and then you can mount it above your bed. You can attach it to.
Oh, right.
I usually bring little sticky Velcro things that I can attach it with, or little screw hooks or something like that.
Gotcha.
I always travel with lots of school supplies to give out. That seems to be very popular places I go. People want pens and paper and
that's a good.
Make sure you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, and little snacks, because if just stuff that you can give to kids that you're going to, and people that you're going to meet. Sometimes you're going to be invited into people's homes. It's always nice to have a small gift to give them. Mm-hmm. Or you're going to find if you travel in the Middle East that probably the most the most welcoming, hospitable people you'll ever meet are Arabs and Omanis, Yemenis people, and the difficulty that I had when I first started. Doing a lot of exploration fishing in that region was getting sidetracked because inevitably you meet someone, you talk to them, and it always leads to an invitation to go to their house and stay a few days. And they're just so welcoming. And if you're ever in trouble, I can tell you times I've been stuck and out of nowhere, a Bedouin will come along and help me. And so I remember listening to your podcast with Oliver White. He talked about that situation where they were out in the boat.
Yep.
And they were approached by a panga loaded with Omanis and ski masks, and they kind of freaked out a bit. And actually, they just thought they needed help. And
I know. Oh, that was awesome. Yeah, that was. I'll put a link in the show notes to that episode. That was. Definitely a good story. Do you have any, if you think about say fly fishing in that area, or in maybe for the Spangled Emperor, any, I guess maybe that'd be a little too specific, but a book resource, video, any other resources that aren't your own that you might recommend people check out to get prepared for something like that? Or because you're kind of known as the person that kind of explored that area for the first time. I mean, are there other people or other stuff online? Are people doing it now?
Other than commercial, there are some commercial operations.
There are.
I could strongly recommend checking out No Boundaries Oman.
Oh, okay.
They're going to launch a liveaboard operation that's going to feature fly fishing groups or host fly fishing groups. In fact, I've been invited to host one of those weeks. Mm-hmm. Edit No Boundaries on Instagram. Check out his site, and it'll blow you away.
Oh, cool.
Fish they're getting out there, and they're targeting huge fish, both on conventional and fly rods. And there's a group of islands off the coast of Oman called the Halaniats, and they're getting species out there that have never been caught on the fly, or for that matter, perhaps even some species conventional tackle. They're getting some very, very interesting endemic parrotfish and what it was. I think there's a hogfish they're catching that's just incredible, and these huge wrasse, all on crab patterns. Mm-hmm. So other than that, I've got I've got the YouTube and the Vimeo channel, and there's on the YouTube there's several hundred videos there.
You
can go through.
Oh, good.
Under No Tema Pez as well.
Yeah.
So as far as a book or there's what I recommend. There's a great book. It's called Birds of Oman. And what's great about it's not a fishing resource, but it's got great maps of places where people go to bird, and a lot of the maps are along the coast, and they show tracks to reach estuaries and fishable water. It's just a great collection of maps.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a
when people land in Oman, they're going to find tons of resources available, print resources for driving and travel.
okay.
And Oman has a great road system. Like I said, the infrastructure is all new.
Huh. Man, it sounds like like I said at the start, it sounds like a place that, obviously it takes some work to get out there. Well, I guess, a plane ticket that, you get that going, but it sounds like a pretty amazing place. Is there any, what are the downsides, I guess, of doing a trip out there?
I can't think of a single downside to
No
doing
kidding.
a trip to Oman. No, Oman's a magical place. It's extremely safe.
There you go.
I've lived there 17 years.
Yep.
I've never locked my car or my house.
That's amazing. That's it.
You
can't even do that. I've lived in places, and I'm sure people that are listening have, where, you wouldn't think of leaving your car unlocked in the U.S. So that right there probably says a lot about it.
No, it's been very special. We raised my children there. I have two daughters, and
wow.
I raised my family there, and they come back every year. I have a daughter in New York and a daughter in Los Angeles, and they fly back every Christmas because they miss it so much.
Oh yeah. What did they get? Do they do some fishing? What line of work did they get into?
My oldest daughter is a writer, and my youngest daughter is a printmaker in Los Angeles. And when they were little, they loved to fish. In fact, I discovered permit in Oman because of a fish my youngest daughter caught off a beach. They were catching 3-spot pompanos with spin tackle, and I was just out there baiting their hooks with small prawns, and they would cast out. And it was, back then it was like as soon as the prawn hit the water, you had a fish on. And my youngest daughter hooked something that was obviously not a pompano, and it was practically spooled her. And I helped her out a bit, and it took about maybe half an hour, but we landed probably a 25-pound permit.
Wow.
Blackjack permit.
Damn.
Off that beach. And that's the first permit. That's the first time I knew that I realized, whoa, this species exists here. And that from that point on, I started looking for them. And it took about 3 or 4 years to find them and another couple of years to figure them out, how to approach them, fish them. But yeah, if it hadn't been, I might not have known they were there.
Yeah.
If I caught that fish.
Wow, that is cool. And I had a note here also on, now this, I think I even watched this movie. Was there the salmon fishing in Yemen? Did you hear about that? That was a movie about, it was about salmon fishing in Yemen. Do you remember that whole thing? And that seems kind of a unique movie title and all that. Do you remember a little bit of that?
I do remember that movie, and I remember, it's not, the concept itself is not very plausible, but
that's right. It was adding. It was basically reintroduce or bringing Atlantic salmon.
They built a reservoir and built a dam, and apparently this Yemeni prince.
That's right.
Who had been schooled in England and fished in that part of the world for salmon, wanted to bring it back to his country, and But I actually posted a video called "Salmon Fishing in Yemen."
Oh, really?
It features which features targeting threadfin salmon, which are quite common. Threadfin salmon, yeah, it's a very popular game fish in Australia and around the Indian Ocean. They get quite large, although the species we were targeting were no more than maybe a kilo or two. But they're and I posted a video, the real salmon fishing in Yemen, and that was on our trip to Socotra, and my mate Kamal was actually the one who discovered them. We were on Socotra we were on Socotra for 11 days, and primarily with the mission of finding, of capturing the first bonefish on the fly in the Middle East, and we didn't get that fish, discover that fish, or get it actually on the fly until like day 9. After exploring but in the meantime, we discovered all these other species as well, including the threadfin.
Oh yeah, the threadfin. It's amazing.
Yeah. And just to be somewhere where, every fish you catch on the fly could be the first time that fish has been captured on the fly. It's just very special.
That's right. Yeah, and I don't think the threadfin has any similarities really to any, or even genealogy to salmon. I mean, it looks,
No.
yeah, this has just got the salmon, king threadfin salmon.
Yes.
Wow, that's an amazing. Yeah, it's got these crazy. It's got this crazy.
These long whiskers.
Yeah, they're whiskers. What is that? Is that a fin, or are those whiskers?
Those are they have these long whiskers coming off the front of their mouth, and they also have a bulbous, sort of gelatinous, translucent nose.
Oh, no kidding! Yeah, their nose is, and it's got 2 dorsal fins.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that all of those mechanisms are designed to pick up bioelectrical signals and to find prawns and clams and things on the bottom. They're very aggressive on flies. It's a very easy fish on the fly if you can find them. They eat flies readily. Shrimp patterns, crab patterns.
Wow. That's so cool. We could have the next, if we do another episode, we'll have to maybe talk about threadfin. That's the cool thing about this. And when I had Jeff on, I think we were talking about the numbers of species, and I know you don't really track, your numbers necessarily, but it was funny because I think he's like above 400 different species.
Oh yeah. He's well above 400.
It just shows you that, you can do a lifetime of it and still not get to all the fish out there on the fly, or just in general.
There are so many species even in Oman that I haven't caught on the fly that if I targeted, I'm sure looked for.
Yeah.
I kind of got sidetracked when I discovered the permit.
That's right. Well, I guess maybe we'll have to leave some of that till the next episode. I did have a quick little rapid fire round here if you got a few more minutes. What's the, if you think of, the best advice you were ever given? Does anything come to mind when you think about, whether that's fly fishing or life in general? It seems like you've had a pretty, you're teaching and you've been in this amazing part of the world. Does anything stick out to you?
I think I'm not sure how I came to this, but I think the best advice I can give anyone for life or fishing, especially fly fishing, is just slow down.
Mm-hmm.
Take your time, slow down, look around.
Yep.
And when we get started, we're all, young, and we just want to charge into the rivers and the beaches, but it's study where you're at before you make a cast.
Yeah. No, I was just listening to a podcast episode on another podcast. It was this guy who, I think Cal Newport was his name. He wrote this book called Digital Minimalism. And, and it kind of goes that same thing, how we're all, so many people are stuck in their devices and they can't, it's just an addictive thing because the companies get you addicted to it. But, slowing down, I think, is part of that, like getting away from that digital world and slowing down and enjoying the natural world is kind of what it's all about. It sounds like, is that,
and
really,
I think, I agree, and I think those devices have made it more difficult for us to make that transition.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about them. I mean, they have some use, like we were saying, the GPS, emergency phone call, stuff like that. But yeah, being able to get away from that and slow down and take it all, especially in these places that you're talking. Which, I mean, I hope we don't overcrowd you here, because I think you're painting a picture of a pretty amazing place that I think a lot of people would like to go to, including myself.
It is. And on the positive side of social media, I've met some incredible people who have actually come to Oman.
That's right.
And the initiative, and I've made dozens of friends and formed lifelong connections with people all over the world through social media. So I mean, I don't mind. I love to share what I do, and I love sharing my water. And honestly, the reality is that, there are a lot of people who are going to dream about doing this, but it's only a few who actually who pull the trigger. And
that's right.
And typically those people who do, I get along quite well with them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's cool. I think that's the neat thing about this podcast is I'm not sure how many people will hear this and, learn about it, but yeah, there'll probably be a very small percentage.
You put your stuff out in the universe, and you never know how it's going to come back.
That's right. Yeah, that's kind of my selfish part on this, is that, I'm listening to this thinking, well, maybe this gets my foot in the door to have some connection to, places like this that, I wouldn't otherwise have.
Absolutely.
So, okay. And what about music? Do you have a band or type of music you listen to?
Yeah. I have a very eclectic taste in music. I love world music. I love music from Africa. I love hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
I like world beat.
What is world beat or world music? What is that like? Is there a band
today,
or some other thing?
World music is a fusion, an amalgam of local music, local instruments, mixed with modern hip hop or ED beats. I follow a lot of musicians in Africa and even some in Yemen and around the Middle East who have taken their traditional music and fused it with modern hip hop.
Okay. Is there a name of a band we could throw out so I can put a link in the show notes to somebody?
Okay. Let me think. Kind of put me on the spot.
Yeah, no,
there.
you can think about that for a little bit. I had another question too for you as far as we kind of wrap up this here. I'm kind of getting into a kind of a fun thing. I'm trying to get somebody on the show. I've asked this question about what your favorite drink is, after a fishing, but I'm kind of getting to the, thinking about more like vices. Do you have any vices that, that are, you kind of, you have in your life that are things maybe, or over the years that you've had to get rid of?
That I've had to get rid of.
Well, or either way, I'll leave it open. Either that you have currently.
Oh, I used to be partial to a hand-rolled cigarette.
Oh, there you go.
Yep. It's like, and it just works so well with fly fishing, especially when I got into situations where I was frustrated. There's a video I made on YouTube where I'm struggling with permit and I take a break, and in the video, I've got the GoPro on my head, and in the video you can see I'm rolling a drum cigarette, and I'm just sitting there on a rock and just waiting. As soon as I'm done with that cigarette, I go out and I hook a fish.
There you
go. And I've had that experience on rivers too, where it just forces you to step back. But I've given that up. I still step back and and be reflective about what I'm doing and right or wrong. And typically it's wrong. But and that goes back to what I said earlier about slowing down. Right. If you're struggling, then stop fishing and think and take a break and step back and think about what's going on.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm trying to, one of my vices, I guess, it's kind of interesting. I heard about this. I'm kind of a podcast addict. I listen to all sorts of different podcasts, but I was listening to this other one. This guy was talking about, they've got this thing called he calls the website the 1 year no beer challenge, or no, it's 1yearnobeer.com. But it basically got into this 28-day challenge. He realized that, he wasn't a big beer drinker, but even just having one beer, a day sort of thing gets you in this habit. And when he broke out of it, it was amazing the stuff it opened up. So I'm kind of I'm 2 weeks into my own little 30-day challenge, no beer. I love a good IPA, but I'm not sure if I'll get him on the podcast. Probably a lot of people don't want to hear that, but I think it's interesting for me. I think about like life and just having a better life and trying things, mixing things up a little bit. That's where I get to some of this stuff. And I think that's what's cool about this trip to your area is that talk about mixing it up. If somebody gets out there, it might change their life, right? Spending a couple weeks over there.
And that's the whole point of travel is to get you out, to step out of your comfort zone, to get you to step out of your habits.
Yep.
And, if for that alone, that's why I do it. That's it.
Yep. Good stuff. All right, Ray. Well, there's definitely plenty more we could talk about, and maybe I'll check back with you here in a year or two and see how it's going. But in the next 6 to 12 months, do you have anything new with yourself or kind of fishing you want to let us know? Yeah.
Well, I didn't mention this to you prior, but I actually just retired. I just finished my last year of teaching, 36 years.
There you go.
I'm going to continue to stay in Oman
for
at least a year, but I won't be working. So I'm going to have. I've been a weekend fisherman for the past 17 years in Oman. So now I'll be able to fish anytime I want. I've got a whole bunch of exploratory trips lined up, and I'll be hosting a fly fishing group with No Boundaries Oman.
Mm-hmm.
It's a liveaboard, brand new liveaboard operation, and hopefully the next time we talk, I'll have a whole bunch of new water that I can share with you.
Oh, there you go. And so are you thinking now as you go into retirement, I mean, like getting more into the fly fishing, I guess, industry or whatever, and doing more trips and things like that?
Not really. If you check out my social media, you can see that I've never endorsed or hashtag brands, and
Gotcha.
I'm not really interested in making that a part of my life.
Yeah.
I understand people who do. I mean, like Oliver White, he's done
That's
it.
right.
And my friend Ed in Oman has put together an incredible operation and has an incredible lifestyle. And you can, but at this point in my life, it's I've actually been invited to guide for a couple of operations, but my response is guiding is a young man's game.
Yeah.
It really is, especially saltwater guiding.
Oh yeah.
And if it's different if you're rowing a drift boat, but
Right.
if you're out there in the middle of Sudan on a flat every day, I watch these guys. They work their asses off. And,
yeah, they do. So why do the No Boundaries Oman? What's that? That kind of is a little bit.
Well, that kind of made a deal with my buddy Ed that I would be to host a trip, to be on the trip and to provide tips and fly tying and demos and just to sort of be a host, basically.
Yeah. Okay. And so after that year, I mean, are you planning on? So what are you doing for the rest of the time? Are you going to stay out there? Or are you moving back to New Mexico?
Well, we have a house in northern New Mexico. It's actually we have a lovely little trout stream. It goes right in front of our house, the Los Brazos. We'll always have that house in the summer, but it's too cold there in the wintertime.
Oh,
so
right.
I think in winter months you'll find me in Mexico, Panama,
Gotcha.
Oman, Colombia, Chile.
Yep.
Places like that.
And so how do you do it now so now you'll just find your own, I guess those areas, so you'll find a place to just live down there for the summer and do it the right way.
Yeah. We years back we entertained the idea of actually buying a place, but
what would be, just before I let you go on that, I just want to make sure, so if somebody did want to go down there for a couple months in the, during the winter here, what would you recommend? I mean, as far as places to stay and that whole process, do you just stay in a, how do people do that when they go down for a couple months at a time?
I think you try to find a place to rent.
Yeah.
Small apartment or.
Yep.
Done it different ways. We used to travel to Chile for 4 weeks at a time and just rent places. Yep. And do a little camping,
Oh yeah. Perfect. All right, and if they want to find you, if people have questions, just no Tema Pez on Instagram.
Yeah, no Tema Pez on Instagram. It's a private account, so just make a request, and I'm happy to add you.
Okay.
And then if you're seriously interested, then shoot me a message and be happy to help you out.
Okay, and I'll put a link to your YouTube channel as well and the Vimeo and. Yeah, and Ray, I just wanted to thank you for coming on and sharing, all the information here. I think definitely this is a place where, I'm not sure how many people will head over there, but I think, who knows, this podcast will probably live out there for a while, and it might get more popular as we go, especially, hearing about how, amazing it sounds. But yeah, I just want to thank you for sharing all your knowledge today, and hope to keep in touch with you.
Oh, me too. I mean, you're more than welcome, and thank you for the invitation. And if you're always welcome. Come see me in Oman.
All right. Well, I'm going to keep that. On that. I've talked to. Right. We've got a guy. You mentioned Texas earlier. I've got a couple of people I've been trying to connect with. So you're on the list now. But all right, Ray. We'll talk to you later.
Cheers, Dave.
So there you go. If you want to find all the show notes with all the links we covered, just go to wetflyswing.com/Ray. Interested in heading out on a fishing trip with me and a few of our great guests from the podcast? We'll be heading out on a lodge trip to one of these amazing destinations next year, and I need 10 people who are ready for a trip of a lifetime. Go to wetflyswing.com/destination to find out more and to get your name in the hat for this trip and ones to follow. If you haven't already, please click the subscribe button on your favorite app. This will help the show find new people out there and will assure that you don't miss the next episode. Thanks again for stopping by and check out the show today. Looking forward to catching up with you soon and maybe see you on the river or online.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com. And if you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes.